yourself, do you consider yourself a capitalist? Would you say you're a capitalist? You believe in capitalism?
I believe in fair capitalism.
Do you believe in socialism?
I also believe in democratic socialism.
So what do you think is too much taxes to, so I asked the question more with numbers. So you're a data person, and I've looked at this a lot. I'm curious to know what you're going to say. Let's take aside capitalism and let's take aside socialism. Let's not give it any labels. Let me ask this question. I make $100,000 a year. How much money is too much for me to pay the government in taxes?
What should the ban be? I think that depends on where you live making that money, for one thing. So your $100,000 in New York versus your $100,000 in Iowa.
Federal taxes. Just look at it from a federal tax standpoint. Don't break it down with states. So state California 13.3. If I'm in Tennessee, 0. If I'm in Texas, 0. Florida, 0. Just assume federal. I make $100,000 a year. How much is too much taxes for me to hand over to the government for the hard work that I put in? How much is too much?
Of that full 100, again, it depends what you get back for. Given what we get back for it here, I think the 33-40% level is fair.
Okay, but so
that's on $100,000. That's on $100,000.
So that's on $100,000. Okay, how about $1 million?
I think on $1 million, I think there could be. I agree with a sort of proportional tax percentage on that. So if I say 33 1/3 or 40% is a max for $100,000, I could see that as like the first $100,000, and then sort of a gradient in a slightly lower direction to get up to the million, but still taxing, that is a proportional amount.
So up to $100,000, 33.5%. Okay, up to $250,000. Let's just say you're saying 40%. If I'm making million up, what should be my taxes $1 million up?
Well, again, I think you should do that same 40% or whatever the grid is.
Okay, fair enough. Got it. So from 33.5 all the way up to 40.
Right.
Fair. Okay. So then the state you're in, the state I used to be in, you're in California, I'm in Texas now. Your state is 13.3. Do you think that's too much to be living in a state of California?
Well, there are certainly taxes in California. I do pay them, a lot of them. But I also think one of the things California does, which other states don't do quite as much, is it sort of does referendum out the things that people have to spend their taxes, the things that are voting, people can vote on to basically decide where their taxes go. This referendum is on the ballot, right? It's kind of the equivalent of. So it's like if I'm getting stuff for my marginal proportion or additional proportion of taxes, I think that's, and a state does that well, or a nation does that well, if you sort of move out of California, I think that's a good thing. And so at a certain level of earning, it's not as necessary. But for sort of individuals on the ground where, there's health concerns, there's education concerns, there's safety concerns, all of that, I think money needs to come into the system to be able to sort of make it run.
California is taking that to a whole different level, and they're losing a lot of people, especially the younger, hungry people, not the people that already made their money, because there's a different story between your money-making years versus you deciding you take your money to a place. For instance, I was in Monaco for our 10-year anniversary, my wife and I. We went there, and the city is smaller than Central Park, right? And the life expectancy in Monaco is the highest in the world. People live 89 years. Yeah, this is after they made their $100 million and they moved to Monaco. That's different. You don't see a 22-year-old saying, I'm going to go make my money in Monaco, right? They're going to go to a different place. As a money-making years of your life, 25 to whatever the number is going to be, 55, let's just say, where you're willing to play offense and go out there and work the 12, 16-hour days, do you think it's fair, the kind of taxes a state like California is passing down to its people?
Again, I think for the people just starting out and the people making less, that I would equate, you know, or sort of lower that tax relative to people making more, the people you're talking about who have more, who have more to be taxed than someone just coming in. I mean, I started out in New York City, where like my entire paycheck went to, obviously, you know, I started out at Chase as an analyst. I mean, my paycheck basically went to taxes and my rent, and that was like it. So I do think that it does matter, like you say, you know, whether you're coming in early in your life, in your career, in your money making situation, or if you're someone who works on tips, or if you're someone who works multiple jobs, or if you're someone who works gig jobs, that I do think it's better to have a lower tax rate for those people, to get them into the economy and to help them build that sort of stability relative to people who have made more or have more. That's what I was talking about in terms of a proportional sort of tax thing, because that makes them stay, and it also brings a foundational kind of economic stability to those people, and therefore, ultimately, it goes forward into the revenues of a state, of a city like LA. If you have the people at the bottom, you know, able to move.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you say that, and I agree with that. When I lived in LA and I would go down that 405 every day, I would sit there, I'm like, okay, let me get this straight. What the hell am I doing? Spending 2 hours a day on the freaking 405 freeway. I landed one day at 3:30. I wanted to go from LAX to Rafi's place to eat. It's 18 miles. It took 2.5 hours to go there. I would not, what am I doing to go 2.5 hours in 18, 20 miles to go to a restaurant? So, and then I moved to Texas, and I had a guy sitting next to me who was a socialist. He's not a capitalist. And we were driving, and he says, man, I don't like the fact that we have to pay the toll here in Texas. I said, well, the way Texas works is you don't pay state taxes. If you don't want to use the toll, then don't use it. Take the streets. You don't have to pay the tax. But in Texas, you pay taxes for things you use. In California, you pay for things you'll never use. Like they had an express road here in Texas, Dallas, and I would pay the money to go through this express, but there's only 2 cars in. I'm like, I'll pay this, no problem. I'm able to go past 300 cars. I never saw that in California. So when you're talking about, and by the way, this is a man that left California at 37 years old, prime money making years, and I'm going to be making money for another 20, 30 years. And they could have gotten a lot of those taxes, but they abused it. And I'm seeing a massive exodus with a lot of younger other people that relate to what I'm saying. So going back to, you said you believe in fair capitalism. I think that's the word you use. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think you said fair capitalism, and you believe in democratic socialism, which is an element of what Bernie talks about. But Bernie also talks about 70%, and you were a supporter of Bernie. I think you guys did some work together. He relied on you on some of the economic stuff. What are your thoughts when we're talking about 70% of taxes and just bashing rich people? The top 1% of America, they're just so this, and they're doing this, and they're doing, oh my gosh, you feel guilty to talk about the fact that you make some money. It used to be a time people admired successful people. I mean, you're somebody that's made millions of dollars. You're somebody that's very successful. You're somebody that essentially is top 1%. If you worked at Goldman Sachs as a top person, you are 1%. What's wrong with going to the 1%? And here's the thing. I don't want to be in a Bernie bash moment, because I truly believe a Bernie against the Trump stood a better chance than a Biden against the Trump, because at least you know what Bernie stands. And that's one of the things I respect about Bernie. Bernie's Bernie. You don't know where Biden's at. When I looked at Bernie, I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter if I disagree with this guy. And I respect the guy that has his own ways of fixing things, and he doesn't flip-flop. And I would have loved to see those two guys going at it, but unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to see that, although it would have been incredible debates people would have tuned into. So going back to it, I've watched your videos, and I've watched your interview with Bernie that you guys did, I think in 2013 or 2016. I don't know what it was. It was many
2009.
2009. I watched that as well. I watched a lot of your work. You seem very reasonable. You seem fair. You seem like you're able to stay in the middle and kind of hear both sides of the argument out. How does someone like you, as reasonable you are, get behind 70% for rich people?
So the work I did with Bernie was mostly on the Fed and the idea of, and on Wall Street. So the idea of basically creating, going back to fairness, sort of an auditing path, a transparency path, seeing what the Fed was doing, where it went, who was getting the most benefit, and this ties in, and also from the standpoint of Wall Street banks, to what extent were they basically creating securities and that was hiding or the risk that ultimately we had all seen in the economy and the financial system, which I believe still exists. It's been papered over. The Fed's thrown money at it, so it's deeper in the system, but it's there. And I think that, so that's what I'm talking about when I talk about a fair environment. From the standpoint of 70% for of all of rich people, if you take someone and wherever you calibrate that number, and you say 70% of all of your income is gone. I do think from an income standpoint, not a wealth standpoint, I think that's very high. From a gradient, which is where I would disagree with an absolute level like that. What I'm saying is that there should be some sort of a gradient between someone more wealthy paying more of the initial part of their income relative to sort of a number that is that high. So it becomes proportional. You're not paying 70%. I don't believe it's necessary to pay 70% of your income. But I'll say this too. I think companies should pay more in taxes to avoid some of these situations in terms of getting money into the budget of our country, into reducing the deficit of our country, which of course now has grown because of the virus, and it does grow because of different crises. I think that rather than not paying taxes into the revenue of the Treasury Department, which right now companies pay about 10 to 13% of the full amount of revenue that goes into our coffers as a nation, it used to be much higher than that. There's maybe a happy medium, but because they're not paying as much, just mathematically, there's a greater amount to be covered in order to run the country. And if there's a greater amount to be covered in order to run the country, and it's not coming from growth, which I think would be the better way to do it, we talked about economic growth earlier, then having a proportional tax system allows some of that to be retrieved, not all of it, not making up for companies not putting as much in, and not necessarily going to that absolute level for everyone who is wealthy in terms of their income. But I do think there's a give and take there. I think that's a high number. I don't. But I also think that we have to, as a nation, use that money, whatever it is, for things that actually sustain economic growth. And companies and individuals and rich people could be doing that. It's not to say that that's not happening, but to the extent that taxes are taken out, they should give benefit to the overall country and the overall growth of our country. And I think that helps both the people at the bottom as well as those who are wealthier, because you just have better roads. Like it might take you 2.5 hours to go anywhere once coronavirus is over, out of LA to anywhere else. That could still happen. But the idea is that you have a more efficient system, whether it's technological or infrastructure wise, because money's going into things that everyone can use, not just rich, not just poor, but all of us.
And you think governments are being efficient right now with our taxes?
No.
So why would taxpayers feel confident constantly paying more taxes while the government can go out there and print money and quantitative easing, give it to whoever they want? And I'm sitting here working my ass off, making 80 grand a year, 100 to whoever it is, $150,000 a year, and barely seeing my kids. And I'm seeing them being bailed out, but I have to pay 50% of my taxes to you, and I'm not seeing the roads getting better. I'm not seeing streets getting better. I have a very hard time with that.
That's exactly the point. The fact is, we shouldn't pay taxes into this massive quantitative easing, money creation into just sort of a market perspective, rather than building the roads or having faster trains or whatever it might be, or having better hospitals or more efficient testing system now, or whatever it might be. I absolutely, I totally agree with that. We have mismanaged the creation of money, let alone our taxes, because we mismanaged both effectively. But throwing the QE into it, throwing the Federal Reserve's balance sheet into it, throwing that massive inflation of just the availability of cheap money that doesn't go into doing anything. I mean, I don't even see lines on the 101 when I get out of LA. They don't paint them. They're old. You just make up your own lanes.
That's the point, though.
And
Why are they paying 13.3? And here's the thing, though, because look, I was telling you earlier, I lived there 24 years, and we're looking at 4 other places to go live, and we were looking to go back to, somewhere around what is that place right by Agora Hills? It's right outside of Agora Hills. It's a nice area. We're looking at Malibu. We're looking at Newport, right? We want to go back to LA. I'm LA. My friends are there. Everything I know is LA. 24 years, from 12 years old to 37. I'm LA, minus me being in the military. We looked at Greenwich. We looked at Florida. We looked at Texas. California went from first place to last place in no time because they keep saying, pay more taxes, gas tax, this tax. And California's like, okay, how many more things you're going to keep raising and nothing is getting better? So a question for you. Who are you comfortable having more power? People, government, or companies? In order, if you were to say 1, 2, 3, what would you say?
I would say people, companies, and government.
We're on the same page. Okay.